Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for the 28th of May 2014. I'm Phil Hinton. Thank you very much for joining us for episode 44. Guys, we haven't even reached a year yet. This is depressing.
Well, at least we're coming into summer again now. I remember when we started, it was early July, and the sun was shining and the nights were long, or rather the days were long and the nights were short. Yeah. And we're just getting towards that again now. So
yeah, unbearable heat, which is what's happened tonight. I've had to switch off the fan heaters. I'm starting.
Christ, you're always moaning, aren't you?
Joining me for this edition, as you've already heard, is assistant editor Steve Withers.
Swim with the fishes, you zombie bastard.
Games editor Mark Botwright.
Stealing shoes off a dead man.
And audio reviewer Ed Selley.
Oh, I'm dead. The sun is setting. Just lay down and throw some dirt on me.
Okay, so moving on swiftly from last week, where we obviously said that the World Cup is coming up, and it is. It's getting closer every week, funnily enough. So, World Cup projector shootout, Steve. We're looking at big screen here. It used to be in the past that you went down the pub and you watched the football on a projector that was in the pub. Usually that projector was caked with dust and all the rest. It had been running constantly for 24 hours a day for weeks on end, and the picture looks terrible. But nowadays projectors, certainly in the home, offer picture quality that's just as good as a flat panel TV and a lot larger.
I'd actually go as far as to say that a lot of projectors offer performance that's better than most televisions. And certainly, as you said, Phil, much bigger. I mean, TV sizes have been getting bigger over the last few years, of course, but the average size is still only, 42 to 47 inches in diagonal, which is still not that big, really. I know probably amongst the enthusiasts listening to this, they've got much bigger screen sizes, but the average screen size is still reasonably small. However, if you buy a projector, you can have, 10 foot, 12 foot, really big, whole wall, basically, as your TV screen. And people often think, well, it's going to take up space, it's going to cost a lot of money. But in actual fact, it won't take up a lot of space. You can buy some really good projectors now that are quite small. They can be sort of put away and then brought out for the big events. You can use the wall, frankly. If you had a reasonably flat white wall, neutral white wall, you could use that as a screen. It's not ideal, but it will work. And the prices have been dropping like a stone recently, and you can pick up some really good projectors now for less than £1,000. So significantly less than you would pay for, even a relatively small high-end TV these days. You can get a projector. So no, I think going the projector route now makes a lot of sense, particularly, as you say, Phil, with the World Cup coming up.
Yeah.
You get your mates around, big screen, you've got your surround sound on, you get in the beers. It's going to make a really good atmosphere, and it'll make it so much more enjoyable. It'll be more like actually being there, but without all the grief of actually having to go to Brazil.
I can see some enthusiasts turning their nose up here with what you're saying, Stephen. I just want to make it perfectly clear that what we're saying here is we're not talking about optimum setup for watching movies in a darkened room with 5.1 surround sound. We're talking about event stuff like the World Cup, like the Commonwealth Games. It's going to happen in Scotland, which is a laugh. This is all happening with the Olympics 2 years ago. If you have family around and that kind of thing, you can have a big event picture using these projectors. And we're only talking about stuff that, I think the most expensive one on your list was £2,000, Steve.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm not talking about a high-end home cinema setup here. I mean, obviously, you could use these projectors for watching movies and other things, and ideally, I suppose you would have movie nights, that kind of stuff. But specifically, what we're talking about here is trying to create a big event for specific sporting events. So, ideally, the World Cup, as you said, the Commonwealth Games, or anything else that's coming down the line, like Rugby World Cups next year, for example. So, you get all your friends around, you put out the projector, you turn it on, and you plug in the HDMI cable into your PVR, whatever you've got, and away you go. You've got big screen action, 1080i feed going up onto a big screen. It's going to look really good. I mean, even with their very basic setup and some of the cheaper projectors, it can still look quite impressive. And I guarantee it will look better than most of the pubs you go into, because as you just pointed out, Phil, they usually left it there for years, badly set up, the bulb's dying. It's never going to be ideal, and you haven't got to put up with crowds and expensive drinks.
I saw one once where it was an LCD and it had obviously been on 24 hours a day for years, and it had burnt the actual panel. So there was nothing in the middle of this panel. It was just yellow. There was
isn't that strangely fitting for an England game?
Well, that's another reason why you don't want to fly away to Brazil, is it? Because it'll be expensive way to go to be flying back again in a week.
I do agree that it isn't a proper pub sort of experience, unless when they kick the ball, it actually produces a solid white line behind it. Just there's so much lag and blur.
Like something out of Tron.
Lag, blur, the wrong aspect ratios. Everyone's like squished or tall and thin. And in the old days, of course, you also had the beam going through a layer of hazy smoke, which was really added to the cinema experience. I mean, the list I produced for the article isn't exhaustive, obviously. I'm sure there are plenty of other projectors and certainly plenty of other cheap projectors, but this is based upon ones we've recently reviewed. And the idea was to come up with a few ideas for projectors that will give good performance for good price, ideally convenient and easy to install.
So obviously, we're not talking about blacked out rooms, blacked out windows, all the rest of it, Steve, but making little adjustments here and there when using a projector, like the type of paint that's on the wall, if you're going to use the wall as your screen, will help.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I said, it's not ideal, and I'm not saying enthusiasts would do this, but you can use a white wall as a screen, and it is. I've got a friend who's using one right now. For various reasons, and it's surprisingly effective. As long as the wall's flat, there's no obvious distortions on the wall, and you're using basically a matte white paint. I think zinc oxide is the suggested paint, isn't it, Phil?
Isn't zinc oxide sunblock?
Well, this was a suggestion that was made on one of the THX courses. Was if you're doing an install to use zinc oxide paint.
All right, never heard of that before. It's usually a matte finish, so you want to go for a matte finish. You don't want a gloss finish. On the plus side,
your room would be impressively corrosion free.
In the event of a nuclear blast, it will survive as well. Now you might too.
Yeah. Right. So obviously that's the picture side. We'll come back to it in a second. But obviously, with this big picture, we want big sound. So Ed, what can we do in terms of big sound?
Well, you've got a couple of options. The easiest one. In this day and age, is you've now got roughly 2 or 3 million soundbars to choose from. It is next to headphones, it's the unquestioned growth area in the market. Over the last sort of few months, Mark and Steve have been looking at quite a few of them. One that I have some experience of due to still working in the background for Cambridge Audio. I played about with the Minx TV, which I think is £150. And again, it's not the most sophisticated device I've ever played with, but it's more than capable of filling a room and making sure that every syllable of the unbelievable banality that is football commentary will be audible to all comers. Obviously, if you want to step it up a little, both Steve and I have been looking at wireless active speakers in the last couple of weeks. Steve looked at a very tasty pair of Dynaudios and a review that went up. Well, have gone up a little while ago by the time. Yes, the Ellipson Planet LWs and their new little wireless bridge, which allows you to, as I've been literally just been doing over the review, slam your Skybox or PVR straight into the back of that. And because they're not wireless in so much as they do need a plug. I need to stress that. But the Dynaudios and the Ellipsons, if we're talking about sort of temporary event setups, you can literally park them anywhere. And they'll talk to their base station and they just get going. And I have to say, it's quite slick as an experience. And it means it gives you a bit of flexibility that you didn't previously have. I mean, if you're feeling really bold, I was trying to work this out. How far behind are the Brazil games? What's the time zone difference? So it should be dark.
Oh, no, hang on. No, it's not 8 hours. It's 5 hours, isn't it? Because they're on the east side of the continent, so...
You see, because if it was properly dark, I was just thinking, you just go the whole hog, put it in the garden, blow it up onto the side of your house.
Yeah, that's one way of doing it.
Could do that.
And then, have a barbecue at the back. And, by the end of it, you can be inebriated. You can have alienated all of your neighbours.
Play along.
But you could have had a really, really, really good evening.
Yeah, you could play along. You could cause a riot.
I won't be held responsible for anyone trying this and getting an ASBO, but I honestly think it's got to be worth a go. Someone who's got either understanding or no neighbours, please, over the World Cup, let's see if you can do al fresco. Like those when they show like films in the park. You can just do a tiny version of it.
Steve would have to try and focus them on the sheep and hope that the sheep don't move around in the field. Isn't that right, Steve?
I could project it onto the side of the house. Actually, I might give that a go just for a laugh.
Yeah,
it's a valid point you raised though, Ed, which is that depending on what time the kickoffs are, if it is say the after or even early evening, because it's going to be summer and it's going to be getting dark late. Obviously, one of the things you need to do as best you can is block out any light, and And one of the easiest things to do is just to put some blackout. You haven't got to buy blackout blinds, but you can easily get curtains or have your curtains have a blackout lining added to them, which is just white. But it blocks the light, and that can make the room a lot darker. Ideally, you want to make the room, if you can, as dark. Some of the projectors that I've recommended are quite bright, which is very handy in rooms with, say, light-coloured walls. But the idea is to make the room as dark as possible, because the darker the room, the more impact the image is going to have, basically.
And if you are a dangerous sexual predator like Steve, that also gives the advantage to put the moves on that special lady or gent if you invite them along to your World Cup evening, because she can't see what's going on when you're in your darkened space.
I have had a few comments along those lines when people have walked into the home cinema with black velvet walls.
Is that shortly before you hit them over the back of the head and the fun begins?
Why is there a bolt on this door?
Why are there hooks on the ceiling? No reason. They were there when I moved in.
Right, okay, so we've set up our projector or our TV. We've got our sound system working. We want to get the best picture possible. In that case, then you want to head over to our Picture Perfect campaign. So if you've got the menu at the top of AVForums, click on Home AV, and within that menu you will see Picture Perfect. You click on that, or you go to myperfectpicture.tv, which will take you directly to Picture Perfect, and everything in there takes you through how to set up your picture, and it'll take you about 5 minutes to do it. It won't take very long at all. Just get the correct picture mode, Steve, and you're good to go, basically. Aspect ratio correct, and that's it.
Yeah, it's very easy. Take you 5 minutes, as you said, Phil, and hopefully as many people possible will do that, because from the Mori poll that we did 2 years ago, we know that the majority of people take their TVs out of the box and just leave them in the mode that they're shipped in. And unfortunately, in 99.99% of the cases, that's one of the worst possible modes you could leave it in. Usually it's something like dynamic, where you've got a picture that's way too bright, far too oversaturated in terms of colours, with all the special features in inverted commas turned on. And so go to Picture Perfect, and within 5 minutes you'll have an infinitely superior TV image.
Right, and the final thing that we need to talk about is frame interpolation, or having the processing turned on a TV or a projector. And this is the one time where I'm possibly going to say you want to experiment with this, and it might be that it looks better leaving that picture processing turned on, because we're talking about fast moving sports, we're talking about balls moving across screens and so on. So when it comes to things on your TV or projector, such as motion plus, motion flow, true motion, intelligent frame creation, active motion, or whatever else it is called on your device, it'll be something like that with the word motion in it. Basically what it does is it creates new frames, it looks at the frame before and the frame after, and then it tries to decide what an imaginary frame in the middle would look like, and it creates that itself, Steve. And we would always turn that off for film material because it makes it just look really odd, but for football it can work.
Yeah, absolutely right, Phil. By adding the extra frames, it gives it a sort of smoothness, which obviously with film material just looks unnatural and looks more like video, so never use it for that. But if you're watching fast-moving sports action, it can be quite handy. Depends on your TV, really. If you've got a plasma TV, you don't really need it, because plasmas have got good response times and they're really fast, good with motion handling. But if you've got an LCD TV, LED LCD TV, then you might find it can be beneficial. With projectors, same kind of principle, really. If you've got a DLP projector, probably won't need it. But if you're using an LCD or an SXRD or DILA projector, then you might find it useful on those as well.
Okay, so we're all set up. We've got our Picture Perfect, and we watched the game. We still want to use. We're
now crying.
Crying because England are out. But Mark, we can use this system for more than just watching football. We could actually play football. We could play FIFA and so on by hooking up our game system.
Yep, perfect way to kind of reenact things and to try and wipe Roy Hodgson's tactics out of your mind. Replay everything, try and get England out of the group stage. Yeah, a little bit of drunken FIFA on a projector is the perfect antidote.
Right, so Ed, what do we need? Obviously, we've not got Mark here for the snacks, but I know that you're an alcoholic, so what do we need for a drink?
I'm a high-functioning alcoholic. I need to be very clear about this. At the moment, it hasn't had any significant impediments on my work or health. That's for later on. But really, first and foremost, the AVForums podcast is still looking for an official beer sponsor. So your name here, if anyone wants to step forward. But really, if we're feeling a small surge of patriotism, you could just work on the principle that 99% of lagers, even if they purport to be from a different country, are brewed somewhere near Northampton anyway. But I think that's possibly a little sort of short-sighted. You want a decent session British beer for the support of our national team. Within that there comes some problems because essentially beers brewed in this country fall into two categories. There's ones which you could drink, well, effectively your bladder will explode before you actually feel any sense of inebriation, or there's ones that will make you go blind well before half time. So it's a bit of a balancing act, but I would say I've been thoroughly enjoying the output of the Badger Brewery, which is not a million miles away from Mr. Withers, in fact.
No, it's not, in fact. No.
And if you, trying to spur our national side to greater success, if you went for the Golden Champion, most supermarkets will normally do you a reasonable 3 for a £5 offer. And it's the right balance between enough to give you that sort of warm haze and deluded self-belief that our national side might do something other than crash and burn, without at the same time leading to blindness, madness, insanity, or violence towards your significant other. That would probably be my choice, unless, of course, someone wants to sponsor me to say something wildly different. In which case, I don't care which country it comes from. Just I'll endorse it.
I'd like to interject, sorry, for a second. If you want an alternative to beer, a drop of West Country cider is always good. I recently sampled something called Black Rat last week. Its tagline was "Beware it bites," and this stuff was lethal. 2 pints of that, and you were absolutely bollocksed.
Well, you see, I mean, that's the problem with you West Country folk. That obviously life is so slow and depressing down there that everything's brewed at sort of. It doubles as a decent sort of cleansing agent. For anyone interested in apple-based products, which won't automatically kill you. On the other side, in Kent, the Aspel's cider company, they make one which it's maddeningly hard to get hold of, but it's called Harry Sparrow. And as a session cider, by which I mean one that you could drink contentedly for an evening and not die, it's bloody marvellous. Really, really good. And if the weather is pucker over the World Cup, which is never a given in this country, that would be a fine choice. But I don't know. I can't be the only person where cider, it's still ruined by sort of formative teenage experiences.
Well,
of trying to drink
Mr.
like 3 litres of Strongbow.
Mr. Botwright is actually in cider country at the moment. Are you not?
Indeed, I am. You've got to go for a little bit of proper cloudy scrumpy.
Yeah.
It's got to look, if you can actually see through it, it's not alcohol, in my view.
It has to be basically has to be a flat, viscous fluid.
Yeah, exactly. If you're not chewing, it's not cider.
I actually think there may have been bits of rat in that Black Rat cider.
Are you sure that wasn't just like some kind of rat poison?
Well, it certainly would have killed a rat. Nearly killed me.
So anyway, in summary, what we're saying is throw something together to watch the football on, whether it's a TV or a projector. Most important thing is the beer or the cider.
As for the snacks in Mark's absence, packet of crisps should do it.
Pork scratchings,
packet of peanuts,
come on.
pork scratchings, yeah.
Yeah,
Got a flash, you can get some prawn crackers. Oh, and a packet of Twiglets. I love a packet of Twiglets every now and then.
Yes, but in all seriousness, there's lots that we can do to make the World Cup better.
Well, because the England team certainly aren't.
Yeah, and the main point there is how to get yourself inebriated and passing out as quick as possible. So there you go.
I would say that one of the advantages of projectors, of course, is that they don't obviously produce sound, with 1 or 2 random exceptions over the years, which does mean that if you want, you can just do the full pub thing and you can have the game on and then you can just listen to some quality tunes instead. And 9 times out of 10, that's going to be far more rewarding than the commentary is.
No, you want to stream foreign commentary.
Oh no,
that's always the best.
That's a viable alternative. I hadn't thought of that, but I mean, football punditry.
You could always put 5 Live on the radio.
It's all horrible, Phil. It's just,
Enjoy listening to the wisdom of Michael Owen?
Just all of them. It's just, I mean, okay, you can do drinking cliche bingo, although that normally results in you being dead in the first 25 minutes. But otherwise, I can't listen. I mean, almost all sports commentary is banal, but football commentary is in a league of its own. It's just awful.
Yeah, so this drinking game, is that every time they mention 66, you've got to take a swig?
Well, that's one of them. Game of Two Halves, classic.
If there was any problem there, perhaps he hit it too well.
Yeah,
that's one I like.
Not going according to the script.
Not over to the final whistle.
I always like get in and amongst them.
Great future ahead of him. The list is literally endless, and you can do different levels of consumption to represent the differing levels of cliche inherent to it. At the end of the day, although that said, if you do a serious drink when anyone says at the end of the day, you'll be dead. You won't survive the World Cup.
Obviously, we're not making any suggestions that people should do this. We're just saying what people can do and what people might do at the World Cup. We're not saying that people should do this. I just want to make that clear.
We're not condoning drinking to excess, for example, are we?
I mean, I don't have a full set of rules for this one. My Eurovision drinking rules have been set in stone for years. But, this you just wing it, make it up as you go along.
You have to be drunk to watch the Eurovision, though. Really.
I completely agree. That's what I've got.
You couldn't do that sober.
It doesn't stop the fact that I absolutely bloody love Eurovision. One of the television highlights of the year for me, bar none. Loved it this year. Bearded ladies, brilliant.
Did you have it on the projector?
I don't have a projector. I mean, having had Steve's derogatory comments about screen size, I had to just slum it with my 42-inch television. But equally, I was able to run it at barnstorming volume levels, because I've always more been a sound guy.
Tagline from the 1998 version of Godzilla we were talking about last week, size does matter, particularly when it comes to home cinema.
Or indeed Pacific Rim, which I see was getting another kicking in the comment section of the last podcast. Go big or go extinct.
Yeah. I was defending it. That's all right.
I completely agree. As I say, it made your sentence there, Steve, absolutely perfect. It made no apologies about what it wanted to be. Amen.
And that's the World Cup.
Don't bother watching, it'll be crap. Just get drunk.
I'll watch it. The World Cup becomes better usually when England are out.
The only thing I have to say, I do normally love a game where it's two countries that you just have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah, the only thing there, again, is the commentary, and it's, he plays an Ashley Cole type role, or he's the John Terry of the team. Shut up.
What, he turns up fully clothed to finals he didn't play in?
Most World Cups deliver
or
he just
enjoys screwing various wives of people he knows.
Allegedly.
No, they usually throw up a couple of entertaining games, and I can remember vividly when Argentina got beaten by Cameroon. That was really good fun. When France were the defending champions in 2002, and they lost all their games and went out in the first round. That was particularly enjoyable.
Iran versus USA.
Oh yeah. Well, actually, I've got to say the final of the last World Cup wasn't a beautiful advert for the game, was it?
No, the Dutch. That was,
the Dutch
they were just trying
to
kick whoever they could, couldn't they?
Yeah, at least they're not a bunch of
I'm sure that will make the edit.
delete.
Anyway, moving on.
I do like chorizo sausages, though.
I got sent this.
Did anyone see the Michael Carrick tweet that people took the wrong way?
No, tell us about
about the singing section at Old Trafford. Did a hashtag get amongst it, which when you break it down into words, some people took the wrong way. And he had to reply saying, some people have taken what I wrote the wrong way.
Right, okay, let's wrap up on some... This is the hardware news section. We've talked about beer and a little bit on how to set your picture and projector up and so on. So let's wrap it up with what's coming for review, Steve.
Well, next week we'll be reviewing the first of the LG TVs. So the LG 47LB730 is coming in, which means we'll also be reviewing at the same time their new web OS system that you had a look at a couple of weeks ago in San Francisco, Phil. So that's our big upcoming reviews. Okay, and that wraps up hardware. We'll be back in a sec with games news.
Right, so some games news, and Nintendo Wi-Fi service shuts down for the Wii and DS titles. Mark, tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, this was one that kind of it was announced back, I think it was early April, but it was something that was kind of actually finally kind of coming to fruition just so we were recording the last poddy. But it deserves a little mention in light of what we've been speaking about with regards, physical media kind of dying and perhaps not having the same longevity. The Nintendo Wi-Fi connection service for online games, basically the company that they were using for their servers, has kind of run into difficulties. And so they're basically shutting down online play for all Wii and DS titles. So there's a lot of kind of legacy content out there, stuff like the Mario Kart games, Pokemon, Super Smash Bros. Brawl, that basically you're no longer going to have the same experience anymore. And it's kind of sad that we all joked about the ET cartridges coming out of the landfill in the desert, but an intact cartridge of ET that has been buried for 30 years will work more like it was originally intended to than a Wii or DS title from 5 or 6 years ago.
You see, this is the worrying thing about everything moving to online servicing. Whether that be film, whether it be games, whether it be extra content, whether it be stuff like anything that's not physical, that's got to be the main worry for certainly our generation, because we're so used to having things in our hands that work and don't rely on online services to get extra features and so on.
Well, hang on a second, because this works on two levels. As the Luddite music fan of the podcast, or indeed just the entire forums, I'm the only one. There's two stages to this. If the content is never yours and it's simply done on request, yes, this is genuine danger. With music and a number of other things, and as I understand it, Mr. Botwright could put me wrong if I've got completely the wrong end of the stick here, with like some of the Steam stuff and things like that, yes, it's a download, but you physically get hold of it, and it then exists. And to the extent where with some games, it's quite possible, if the user group is determined enough, that they can reset up online play. They can do whatever the hell they like with it if you're physically in possession of the download. In so much as it's not the same as it simply being an on-request based exercise.
But no, it as was said, it's kind of that licensed model where, say you don't necessarily own something. However, these we're talking about a physical media that you have bought, that you perhaps may have bought on the proviso that you wanted to be able to play multiplayer gaming, and it's something that say EA have been doing with the FIFA titles. If you own an old FIFA title, well, the servers have probably shut off for that. Even though because there's such a small amount of people using it, and at a given point, you will be deemed part of too small a group. You're in the minority then, and it's not worth the upkeep of servers and the like. Now, people have said, well, perhaps given the frankly monumental amount of money that Nintendo made on the Wii and the DS, that perhaps they could have sorted out their own servers. Perhaps they could have sorted it out themselves. But by the same token, they do want to kind of shift people along. They're the victims of their own success, in a sense, that they've had these kind of breakout products that everyone owns, and then no one's really migrating to the latest product that they've got. But they're keeping online, web browsing, media services such as, is there one called Netflix?
What have we said about saying the N-word?
And they're keeping that kind of thing running. So, they still work in a sense, but yeah, it's always sad when, there's the idea that perhaps in a kind of video games hall of fame or something, there are certain cartridges that will work as they were intended, and others where, they're just basically half a title now.
I don't know. I've got to be honest. I mean, when I'm become supreme ruler of planet Earth, Mario Kart acolytes will actually be pulled apart by real go-karts. It's the worst racing game in the history of the universe, so no great loss.
What are you drinking tonight, Ed? Because you've You're a depressive. You're a depressive drunk
I'm
tonight.
sorry, I hate Mario Kart. I love racing games, and Mario Kart is not a racing game because it relies on blind chance.
We're just going to
and
call
not
you
skill.
Ed. I hate Selley. That's what
I
we're
know.
going to call
Well,
you.
we've got a podcast lined up near before Christmas where it's just going to be.
Yeah, maybe for Christmas we'll do Ed's.
Yeah,
everything
well,
he hates.
Ed, it's not Christmas yet, so lighten up, mate.
All right. Okay.
Come on, summer's coming. Yeah.
Mario
We'll cut down the
Kart's
tournament.
great.
It's not. Sorry, just isn't.
Not even on the SNES?
None of them.
Getting back to the original point, there are other kind of PC and console games that did use GameSpy's service who will be affected by this, but it seems like a lot of them are kind of, finding their own solutions. I know it sounds like a lot of the EA titles will be fine. They're actually backing them and keeping them up and running. So, not everything is lost, but it is a bit of a shame with regards to Nintendo. However, it should be noted that traditionally Nintendo, they have had to be kind of dragged kicking and screaming towards even the 20th century in terms of online connectivity. And I doubt the user base for online games amongst the Wii and DS at the moment is terribly large.
No, I always assume that most of them are sort of sitting in the corner gathering dust now because people have moved on, as you said last week, Mark, have moved on to playing games on tablets.
Yeah, and their online solutions were never particularly good anyway, because the things like friend codes that, who's remembering some kind of, like 8-digit number or something in order to connect to someone. It just wasn't very good, and people, as soon as the Wii was online, people were thinking about how they can connect up a PC to use Skype at the same time to get voice chat. It was all fairly clunky anyway.
I do remember some forum members diligently mentioning them in their SIG. They were keen.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there are still a lot of people who are very much devoted to it, and there are a lot of people out there who still feel that the Wii was, shall we say, unfairly categorized as this, mainstream machine for kind of women to play Wii Fit on and for grandma to pretend to bowl with.
When you say a lot of people, Mark, do you mean you?
No, I was signed up to it. There were some fantastic kind of slightly off the wall games, stuff like No More Heroes and some very kind of interesting little oddities that otherwise wouldn't have come about. And it should be noted that, with regards motion controller and the way that Nintendo kind of brought things like the Wiimote into the public consciousness, I don't think we would be seeing the same strides to get towards a future of gaming where you will have virtual reality. Because one key thing with VR is the input method. It's something that people have been kind of struggling with for years, simply because it's so tough to create this idea of complete immersion, and at the same time, particularly with keyboards and mice, to have like hotkeys and that kind of thing to see where it is, because you can't see because you've got a damn great headset on. So, it's something that they've had to try and find a solution for. And I think in some small way, Nintendo perhaps helped push the industry towards that.
Yeah, all right, I will. They just need to be bought by Apple. They can join Beats and all the rest of it and just become a sort of empire of past glories. Be great.
you really have turned into the old man sitting in the corner drinking and just full of the joys of the world.
Step down off the ledge. Life's worth living. Mario Kart's great.
Do you want to know something really bizarre? Obviously, it just struck me as the full absurdity of this situation. Apparently, I may or may not sound different to people listening to the podcast this evening. I'm actually using a proper microphone for the first time in God knows how long. And I'd actually just rushed up with no pair of headphones. So I've just had to jury rig my laptop going into another pair of headphones that are here for review. They were mentioned earlier on. They're not being reviewed for AVForums, they're elsewhere. But I'm actually listening to Mark defend Nintendo on a pair of all up it's £7,000 worth of stuff. There's 3,000 odd on the headphones and then a big valve thing to make it work. And I just strikes me as it's quite charmingly bizarre. But yeah, I am old fashioned.
And it makes you sound like you're depressed.
What can I say? It's obviously, as I say, it's the flirting with death. I've got this hundreds of volts on either side of my head.
That's what it is. It's the electricity playing.
If we hear a noise, we'll know it's the end of Ed.
Right, anyway, that wraps up games news for this week, and we're still a couple of weeks away from another podcast, a games podcast. So we're going to move on quickly to movie news. Right, okay, movie time. What's at the cinema, Steve?
Oh, this week, Phil, I saw Pompeii, which I can best describe as Titanic meets Gladiator meets Dante's Peak. And I'm not kidding, that is the film. But I really enjoyed it. Like we were talking about last week, it's just really entertaining and fun, which is all I want out of a movie. I mean, it's got gladiatorial combat, it's got a bit of Roman action going on, it's got some really nice effects. It's
Roman action, is that a horrible euphemism?
What it means is there's well buffed up gladiators.
But there is that for Chris, yeah.
That's
yeah.
you.
It's a great fun movie, and it's shot natively in 3D by Paul W.S. Anderson. That's not to be confused with Paul Thomas Anderson, who's the actually classy director. Paul W.S. Anderson, who made, among other things, Event Horizon and most of the Resident Evil movies. I think all the Resident Evils, actually. 3D in it is excellent. He really does know how to use 3D effectively. So it's a really good 3D movie. It's well made. It's great fun. It's got Keith Sutherland hamming up something chronic as the main villain, which was really enjoyable. It's got Kit Harington in it, who plays Jon Snow in Game of Thrones as the main hero. There's also Emily Browning as a sort of his love interest. And obviously everyone knows what happens. The mountain blows up. But I really, really enjoyed it. It was great fun. And that's all I want, just to be entertained for an hour and a half. And I was thoroughly. I'll give it 8 out of 10.
Have you, joking aside, not in a derogatory, I'm genuinely new to it. I haven't seen the film, but I have read the Robert Harris book years and years ago. And I did enjoy the book. I thought it was very good. I've enjoyed most of Harris's.
It's not based on the book, is it?
I thought it was at least in a skeletal form based on the Robert Harris.
What happens in the Robert Harris book?
Well, amazingly enough,
Vesuvius blows up, obviously.
Yeah. Don't spoil it.
Well, just on a very basic level, it just deals with a number of individuals and their escape or otherwise from the events of Pompeii and Herculaneum in AD 43 or whenever it was that the balloon went up, so to speak. Obviously
it's based upon his book, but certainly the film that I saw is quite literally an amalgamation of actual scenes and almost dialogue from Gladiator. Certainly the first half is very reminiscent of Gladiator. There's a love interest a la Titanic, doomed lovers if you like, and then obviously there's the the volcano eruption, which has things like pyroclastic clouds like in Dante's Peak. So it's kind of amalgamation of those three things. Not that's a bad thing. I mean, sometimes all I want to do is see a volcano explode, and I did, and that was the main thing, and it looked really cool. And as I said, what I really enjoyed was the 3D was done really well, really effectively used, which is so rare these days. Everyone's been banging on about Gravity, but I actually think that Paul W.S. Anderson is one of the best purveyors of 3D movies going these days. And unfortunately, people don't appreciate that. Probably because of his bad reputation from some of the other dodgy movies, but certainly...
Yeah, probably because he makes a load of shit.
Well, no, I mean, yes, he's made some dodgy films in the past, but certainly the last 4 he's done have all been 3D, native 3D, and have been very enjoyable. So, what the hell, He was entertained. I wasn't bored, and he wasn't bothering with excessive, exposition like in some other films we've been talking about. He was just got on with it, blew up a mountain and killed everybody. Great.
Wasn't he Austin Powers' boss, Basil Exposition?
Yes.
Oh, fine, okay. Sorry.
I'm really worried about you tonight, Ed.
No, I'm fine. I mean, yeah.
Talking
about Blu-rays, what's released next week, Steve?
Next week we've got Jack Ryan, Shadow Recruit, directed by Kenneth Branagh and starring
Chris Pine.
Thank you, Chris Pine. And starring Chris Pine and Kevin Costner and Keira Knightley. And I've got to say, I saw it at the cinema when it came out and really enjoyed it. It's a bit of an old school spy thriller. It's got Kenneth Branagh himself playing the Russian villain. It didn't do particularly well at the box office, so I got thinking we won't see any more Jack Ryan movies, to be honest. But if nothing else, talking about it at least got me to go and listen to the commentary track on Some of All Fears that Ed recommended. That was worth a listen because it is really funny. Anyway, that's out next week. We've got Dallas Buyers Club out next week. I strongly recommend that you buy or rent this movie. I think it's absolutely superb. Oscar-winning performances from Matthew McConaughey and Jared Leto. Certainly my pick of the week. And the other thing getting a release next week is Disney's Sleeping Beauty, which is obviously being re-released in order to tie in with Maleficent, which is coming out the week after. But of those three films, all are not bad, actually. All are pretty good. But in my mind, it would go on Dallas Buyers Club. It's absolutely superb and definitely my Blu-ray of the week, if you like.
I think it's the first week where I'd watch all three, to be honest.
Yeah, quite actually is. And usually there's some tat in there, but those are all good movies.
Right, so to wrap up this week's podcast, Steve posed the question last week.
I didn't pose the question. Ed posed the question.
Oh, Ed, was it?
Yes.
All right, okay, sorry.
I wakened from my depression and torpor to think, you know what, I honestly wanted to discuss this.
This was your idea,
okay,
Ed.
Well, okay, Ed, your idea, you explain it, and off you go.
Right. As we know, books are... they're a massive sort of mine of content to be turned into either television serial dramas or turned into films. And as we know, this happens with varying degrees of success and indeed faithfulness to the original content. As an example, obviously, Apocalypse Now is loosely based on Heart of Darkness, in as much as it involves a river and a man called Kurtz, but you couldn't say it's a frame by frame sort of positioning of it. But I do love both things. But it did get me thinking that I do see the strangest books being made into films. I'm thinking, why on earth have they bothered? When at the same time, we must all know a couple of books where you're thinking it's not that long. It's beautifully laid out. It doesn't do anything like blow up a galaxy, although that said, in some special effects these days, you could probably do that if you were minded to do so. And you're thinking, why has nobody made the plunge and tried to make this into a film? And given it's my poison chalice, I will start. And I know that Phil's out because he proudly announced in a recent podcast he doesn't read books. Do you eat them? Burn them?
No, actually, I read the Radio Times, and funnily enough, everything that's mentioned that gets turned into a TV programme or a film.
Well, it's a good point, well made. For me, it's a reasonably old book now. It was released in the 90s, and it was a writing partnership between Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman, and it's called Good Omens. And I love that book. I love it on a level I can't easily describe. It is at once a perfect partnership of what makes both of those authors great, at the same time with them cancelling out some of the failings that you might be, if you were feeling uncharitable, you could say that they individually have. And it would just make one of those truly perfect, made by Film 4 or similar sort of British. It's set in the UK. It could be done predominantly with the crop of UK actors that we have at the moment. And as far as I'm concerned, it's a no-brainer. It would be done by someone who had any sympathy at all for the original material. It would be a truly extraordinarily good film. And yet we see all sorts of other stuff being done instead. That's the one that stands out for me. I mean, I have others, but I'd be happy to throw it out to the floor first, rather than me just monologuing.
Well, since you mentioned tie-up, two writers writing a book, the book I've been waiting to see made into a film for nearly 30 years now was a join-up between Stephen King and Peter Straub called The Talisman, which was bought, the film rights were bought when it came out in, I think it was 1984 or 85, by Steven Spielberg, and it still has not been made into a film, which is bizarre because you think everything else Stephen King's ever written, right down into including his shopping list, has been made into a film, but somehow The Talisman remains unfilmed, even in its book that I really enjoyed. So that's what would be one of mine. It's a book that has been made into a film, but I'd like to see it be done again with modern effects, is Dune, because whilst I love David Lynch's film of Dune, it is very much David Lynch's version of the story and is bonkers.
Do you not believe that's honestly unfilmable, though?
No, it's not unfilmable. I think it can be done, but it would be very expensive, and that's probably the problem, I think. Talking about plenty of unfilmed, I've seen at least I've seen 2 films in the last 6 months that were made from, frankly, unfilmable books. So I think Winter's Tale was an unfilmable book. They shouldn't have bothered trying. And The Book Thief didn't really translate very well to the movies because, it kind of... the fact it's narrated by death might work in a novel, but doesn't work so well in an actual movie. But I think Dune could be made into a great movie, if especially with modern effects. I'd also, if anyone wants to check it out, there's a documentary called Jodorowsky's Dune about the abortive attempt to make Dune into a movie in the mid-70s.
Is that the one with Salvador Dali?
Yeah, Salvador Dali was going to be paying $100,000 a day to play the Emperor of the Known Universe. Dan O'Bannon was doing the effects, and he hired H.R. Giger, who died sadly a couple of weeks ago, to design Gidi Prime. And Ridley Scott, when that film fell apart, Ridley Scott stole all those guys for Alien. So Alien would never have happened without Jodorowsky's Dune, and certainly wouldn't have looked anything like it did. I mean, he basically just picked up all the same artists, Chris Foss, Mobius, Geiger, were all working on Jodorowsky's Dune, and they all basically jumped ship to Alien when that film went down. So again, very influential, and I'd love to see someone have another crack at Dune, to be honest.
I don't know. It carries a long shadow and a bit of a stick. I mean, in so much as it's sort of regarded as one of those sort of semi-cursed things that you don't go near. But no, I do emphasise it. It's a magnificent book. It's just in the context of how we do space films now. It's just peculiar. I'll leave it at peculiar because none of the other adjectives are really sensible. But it's a funny universe. Can you imagine? Obviously, part of the thing that makes the David Lynch one, I mean, they're just trying to explain without the long monologues the nature of how spaceflight happens and why the universe is as it is, and that's not easy to do.
Well, that's a challenge of adapting something, isn't it? Anyway, that would be. I mean, it has been filmed obviously at least once. Plus, there's been a TV miniseries of it as well. But it would be nice to see someone have another crack at it. But The Talisman definitely is a book that's not been filmed. That's been optioned for at least 30 years by Steven Spielberg. And Mr. Spielberg, if you're listening, where's the film?
Mr. Spielberg, if you're listening. Okay, I might be on a depressive streak this evening, but I'm going to break it.
Optimism on my part.
I think that's unlikely.
I honestly think that both of you are falling down into the classic mistake of picking good books or books that otherwise fit the medium that they were made. I think that there's a certain art in taking something that's slightly unpolished and something that perhaps would suit the screen better. Stuff like Dune, I don't know whether it is possible. I think there are a lot of books out there that if they're ever going to make the screen, the only way you can do it would be miniseries, would be 6 hours minimum.
Well, that's definitely the case for Stephen King's Dark Tower series. I think that's
exactly.
what they've been talking about doing it as a series of films and HBO miniseries combined, which is interesting.
Another example of that is Neil Gaiman's American Gods, which apparently is now in production as a series, although that's been on and off as a rumour for God knows how long. And if they do that with any degree of skill and focus on the original book, that will be bloody marvellous. But
certainly, if you look at Game of Thrones, that's been a phenomenal success for HBO in terms of adapting those novels into 10-hour seasons.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, that's an example though of something that's kind of so wordy that you can't kind of condense that. Because to condense it, you're going to strip it of any meaning. There's no point having a twist unless you've laid the groundwork suitably beforehand. And also, I think with certain things like kind of sci-fi, I mean, it still kind of does seem a little bit spectacular that something like 2001 was filmed. Because, it's a lot about concepts. It's a lot about, sci-fi. It kind of almost asks you to commit yourself to kind of think about these themes, which... In a book, you can kind of just stop, you can pause, you can kind of think about something. In a film, you've got to continue, 1 minute rolls into the next. I think sometimes some of the best adaptations are the kind of things where you could almost see someone writing it for the screen and doing what, say, a good editor would do for the book, or perhaps should have done for the book. I know there are certain kind of novels that I've enjoyed that are, the writer has a good eye for, say, what would make good screen violence or mood and that kind of thing, but just can't write dialogue. There's a lot of exposition that you just think you could cut out 100 pages of this, and you could have, just have moody shots and that kind of thing, and just have it as pure story.
Well, a classic example of that, if we're talking about not great books, but books I love, the unluckiest author in this regard is Clive Cussler, because he's had 2 films of his books made, and one missed the point. Raise the Titanic is just utterly joyless. It completely misses the semi-fantastical nature of the book entirely. And Sahara, featuring now the greatest actor that ever lived, Matthew McConaughey, isn't actually a bad film at all, but it took so long to do and cost so much money that it nixed that pretty much at the outset. And if you're familiar with, I would regard him as, he is the king of airport fiction. As a genre, some of those you could do magnificent things with those, especially if you actually didn't try and turn them into the present. You actually set them in the years they're supposed to happen in. Bloody marvelous! You could have a riot with most of those books, because again, dialogue meaningless. He literally is up there with Alan Titchmarsh in worst written descriptions of sex ever. Were it not for the fact that he has 2 children, you'd question whether he had actually had sex. But the books are magnificent for all of that. And that's a classic example for me.
It also generated one of my favourite quotes, whereas the Titanic, when Lou Gray, when the film went over budget, Lou Gray said it would have been cheaper just to lower the Atlantic.
Yes.
Of course, bad books can make great films, because don't forget, if anyone's ever read Jaws, not a great work of fiction, but it's an awesome movie. I know you haven't seen this, Ed. You should really watch it. It's a shocking mission in your film knowledge.
It's on my
same goes for The Godfather. Bloody awful book, if you want my opinion, but a great set of movies. So, or at least Godfather Part 1 and Part 2 are a great set of movies. Interesting you mentioned 2001: A Space Odyssey, Mark, because the screenplay and the book were written simultaneously by Arthur C. Clarke and Stanley Kubrick. And I vastly prefer the film, having read the book as well. Whereas the book over explains stuff, the film just leaves it to your imagination, and I think that's a much better way of doing it.
Yeah, I think you can get away with some of that in kind of certain types of sci-fi. But as I say, it all depends about context. I mean, there are books that I greatly enjoy. John Connolly does some kind of horror noir books that have got some of the worst kind of cliched dialogue and some kind of filler material that makes you think, you've just researched this and decided to write out the Wikipedia entry, haven't you? But the descriptions, so you can skim read like a complete page and just think, no, going to have no bearing. And then you suddenly get to actually something happening and the horror elements and the noir elements and the like. And he describes it so perfectly. And those are the kind of things that I just think, someone could, you could just literally tear out pages and you would almost create part of a screenplay from that just by ending up with, right, here are the kind of 36 pages left from it.
I tell you what, I really wish The Golden Compass had been a hit, because I'd love to see them try and make the other 2 books into films, particularly the last book where they go on a war against God. That would have been really, get out of that one, son. I pity the poor sod that would have to try and adapt that into a screenplay.
Well, the interesting thing on that note, I mean, that got me thinking of War Against God. If anyone's ever read the Preacher series of comic books, there was a time where like anything comic book graphic novel related was considered practically unfilmable. If you think of the time before, stuff like Sin City and 300 and Watchmen and the like have really kind of shifted the focus there from, you've had kind of aborted kind of absolute dross like the Hellblazer adaptation, and slowly that's become more and more credible to the point where now, those seem like almost the most bankable films.
Yeah, poor Alan Moore has not had a good track record when it comes to adaptations of his stories, is it really?
I don't think he must.
Well, he certainly
just
feels that way.
Yeah,
Although
avoid.
he hated V for Vendetta, and I thought that was a really good adaptation of the graphic novel. I thought it updated it in a really clever and interesting way. It's the Wachowskis that did the adaptation, and I thought that was a really good movie. But Constantine, yeah, fair enough. League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, yeah, absolute stinker.
Fair enough.
Excuse me, Ed?
Yeah, I think League of Extraordinary Gentlemen stands out as probably the greatest opportunity missed.
Yeah, and I was bizarrely though, the Watchmen was probably too referential to the original material. Probably could have been more of an loosely adapted and been better. I think it stuck to the graphic novel too closely. What else? Oh, Hell! Oh, God!
From
Hell. Yeah, I love the graphic novel, and the look of the film is great, but Johnny Depp as Aberline is just ridiculous. And having him as a clairvoyant as well, which is oh god. So if you're any kind of ripperologist as I am, that film was a gigantic letdown. Unfortunately, that would have been something that would have been ripperologist. Yeah, that would have been a novel or graphic novel that would have made a great miniseries, as you pointed out, where you could have spent much longer covering because it's a huge graphic novel, massively researched by Alan Moore, as all of his work is. And would have made it an interesting mini-series, but by trying to cram it into a 2-hour movie and amalgamating characters and that sort of stuff, it just didn't work, unfortunately. Although it did look great. They really captured the East End in the late 19th century.
Right, so that's the guys' thoughts on this. What do you think? What book do you think would make a good movie? What would you like to see made into a movie? Leave your thoughts and suggestions on the podcast, underneath the podcast on the forums, or send your ideas and suggestions to podcast@avforums.com via the email. And sadly, that's all we've got time for this week. My thanks to Steve Withers.
No. This chicken's with me.
Mark Botwright.
Well, at least we get to see the carnival.
And Ed Selley.
Yeah, but I didn't think we was going to be the carnival.
Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, bookmark AVForums.com for latest reviews, news and video, and why not leave us a rating on iTunes if you enjoyed the show. I'm Phil Hinton, thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you again next Wednesday.